Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. No matter what time it is where you are right now, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me tonight. For those of you who are new, my name is Madison or Maddie, and I love to make content on health, wealth, happiness, and living my best luxury lifestyle. And that's what I want for all of you. So if you're watching this and you want any of those things for yourself, then keep on listening and be sure to check out my other episodes where I dive into other topics like dating and relationships, nutrition and weight loss, and so much more. And I will apologize in advance if the audio is quiet or staticky at all. This microphone is pretty good, but at a distance, it has like mixed results. So be sure to leave a comment if you're having a difficult time hearing me. But hopefully the microphone is good enough for now, and we can continue on with this episode. So without further ado, I kind of wanted to make this video a little bit different from how I normally do it. I might repurpose this into a podcast, so apologies if you're on audio. So either way, however you're listening to me right now, I wanted to start off with some health and wealth news. And I figured this could be a really fun way to kind of talk about what's relevant in the world and just drop back to the topics we love to discuss on this show. So now I'm going to go into screen sharing and show you exactly what I'm talking about. So, welcome to Health and Wealth with Maddie. Today is September 23rd as of this recording, and 2022 is the year. Next slide. So basically my wealth news is like finance news today. Basically, the chair of the Federal Reserve of the United States, Jerome Powell, he chose to raise the interest rates by 75 basis points, which is basically 0.75%, up from the previous 75 basis points that he raised in the federal meeting before. So in the United States right now, we're basically in a stage where inflation is so crazy high that the only way to beat inflation is to raise the interest rates, aka the interest rate on any type of loan. And this in effect is supposed to lower demand from the general public and as a result bring down inflation. However, because the job market has been so strong and because the demand has not gone down, inflation has stayed red hot. This is not going to be good in the long run though. So the Federal Reserve is really just trying to stabilize the supply and demand. We're currently kind of in this like supply side recession. So the tables will turn and this can turn into a demand side recession. So if we see unemployment rates going up in combination with interest rates finally being an effective way to decrease demand, then we could potentially go too far in that opposite direction and overcorrect, and it would turn into a quote unquote hard landing. So essentially, during Paul Volcker, I think it might be his name, during his era of being the chair of the Federal Reserve, way back in, I think it was the 1970s or 1980s, he had a hard landing and he purposely put the economy through a recession in order to beat inflation. So Jerome Powell, while he's been kind of talking about a quote unquote soft landing, aka something that isn't as dramatic and scary sounding, we are sort of in that direction where a more aggressive approach is needed, and we are just not seeing inflation go down. It's currently above 8%. It was above 9% at one point this year. So compounding that percentage over time means that over the course of say 3 years, if if inflation rates are above 8%, then you're essentially looking at spending 1.25 on a unit of one. So for example, let's say I'm buying a house, right? That house, for a house that's half of the price, you're currently paying the same monthly mortgage. For a house that's $600,000 versus a house that's $300,000, you're still paying the same amount each month in mortgage rates. And this is because of the fixed rate mortgage average going up over the last 30 years. So as you can see in this chart here, the last time we had interest rates go up this much fixed mortgage rates over 6% was just as we hit the 2008 financial crash. And this was a recession, it was a housing market crash, it was really terrible, and it screwed a lot of people over. A lot of people to this day have not recovered. So seeing it reach this peak once again, I mean, correlation doesn't equal causation, but we're kind of looking like we are in another 2008 style recession. And so that's quite frightening, especially because in 2020, the money printing and the stimulus checks kind of kept the economy afloat. So as you can see in this chart where it says 2020, there is a small sliver representing a mini recession of sorts, but now we're sort of overdue to actually experience the pain and the real demand, the real supply for goods and services here in the US. And so that's why we're sort of having to go through a recession. It's a necessary recession. It's not because, the Federal Reserve, hates you or wants you to suffer. It's just like a necessary part of the economic cycle. So we can't live in this fake environment anymore, which is why we need to crush inflation by lowering demand, by which we can do by raising interest rates and maybe even see some unemployment. If the inflation rates had gone down sooner, then we wouldn't need to be this extreme, but we're sort of failing in the government to do so, which is why more dramatic action is needed. And there's a lot of pressure on certain sides in the political space, pressuring Jerome Powell to be even more aggressive than he currently is. So, for example, most people were definitely expecting a 75 basis point hike. However, some speculated that it could be as high as 1%. However, it sounds like that Jerome is setting us up to expect a 1.5% increase the next time they have a Federal Reserve meeting. So what this means is that he could be potentially doubling the rate at which we are raising interest rates. And so if this happens, then currently the sentiment is going to be more conservative, and we're going to be a little bit more reserved to spend our capital. And this is exactly what they want. So whether or not it actually goes up to 1.5 or not is sort of like out of the question, because the point is to try to decrease demand. So if you want to throw a big scary number like, 150 basis points, and if that does the trick, then so be it. And we should all be expecting that. Anyways, kind of continuing on with the mortgage rates, right? So there's apparently not an exact perfect relationship between interest rate hikes and mortgage rate hikes. However, it's sort of like a given, because if you have the cost of debt go up, then you need to increase the cost of your income, meaning you need to make more money to cover that extra burden that you're taking on. So it's just like if inflation is up 9%, then you would hope that your employer increases your salary by 9% to match that, right? To help offset it. And so the mortgage rates are usually the last to get hit the housing market. So we're finally seeing this now. We're seeing that fixed interest mortgage rates are double what you would have spent just 1 year ago. And as shown in this chart here, it's the highest mortgage rate that we've seen since 2007, just before the 2008 housing market crash. In this chart, I actually put a couple of arrows too, so you could see just how long that took. You're looking at, say, after 9/11, you're going into 2002, 2003, and you're seeing these interest rates sort of bounce up and down that 6% mark, but then finally hitting a peak in 2006, 2007, and then by 2008, you see that recession last almost 2 full years. So it's kind of up in the air how long this potential recession might last for, but it's definitely something to keep our eyes on. And I think the big takeaway for someone like me, who's 22-year-old female in the United States who went to college, what this means for me is, while the Biden-Harris administration has a student debt relief plan, these are just expectations. No one has actually gotten a refund quite yet. So in the meantime, I'm going to continue paying my student loans, and this is because the debt that I hold is becoming increasingly more expensive to hold. So you're better off trying to minimize your debt as much as possible so you don't owe anyone, and not to mention have that cost of owing someone else increase, every time there's a Fed meeting. So what this means is I'm wanting to be in cash now because I'm trying to plan for both emergencies and to create investments. So both an emergency fund and an investment fund. However, I just really, really want to crush my student debt and any other debt that I have because, like I said, it's just becoming more expensive to own said debt. So another key indicator that we can look out for to see if we're turning a corner is if unemployment begins to increase. This is pretty scary for someone like me because while I believe that I have a stable job, I'm also super young and super inexperienced compared to a seasoned professional. So I feel like I'm more susceptible and vulnerable to becoming unemployed if the market really did get that bad. However, obviously, fingers are crossed, and I'm going to do what I can. So, I highly recommend that you look into this as well. And if you're feeling afraid, now's the time to not be afraid because a common tip you hear in the investing space is when people are fearful, be greedy, which is why you should try to maximize the cash that you have and minimize your debt. Okay, so moving on now, I want to talk about health news. So I know that was really intense, but we're going to get into it again. I'm sorry. We got to talk about this. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is sounding the alarm bells in the United States because it's increasingly um, becoming the top cause of drug overdose in the US. So, for those of you who don't know, I actually just learned about this as well. What fentanyl is that it's a synthetic opioid which is medically used for treating pain. However, it's obviously being abused just like a lot of other drugs on the market. Um, and some of the effects of this include extreme happiness, but also some other effects like drowsiness, nausea, confusion, constipation, and the list goes on. Coma and even death. It's actually one of the things that can truly, truly kill you if you overdose. And it's super easy to overdose. I believe, don't quote me, but 2 milligrams is enough I don't know if it's enough to make it work or if it's enough to overdose, but it's some really small measurement is the point. So, if you are someone who's interested in looking into this, on this chart, you can see on the right-hand side, the DEA. So the DEA is the Drug Enforcement Administration. It's a government agency, and they're sounding the alarm bells on this quote unquote rainbow fentanyl. And it's marketed to look like candy, to market to kids and teens, people that are susceptible or vulnerable to wanting to experiment with these types of drugs. And then, as you can see on the left hand side, the running total by year, as the years have gone on and gone on, fentanyl has actually grown exponentially and outpaced every other drug, as you can see on this list, including meth, antidepressants, and something that is super popular like cocaine. So it's just crazy to see this, that it's just a highly lethal drug overall, and it's becoming increasingly abused. So, what can we do about this? If you know someone or if you yourself are struggling with drug addiction, whether it's fentanyl or anything else, I actually discovered this hotline through my research on this drug, and I thought this was super cool. So it's called neverusealone.com. You know how they say that you should never drink alcohol alone? Well, why not do the same thing for drugs, right? Because overall, you're trying to cope with some type of pain that you have, whether that's mental, physical, spiritual, whatever. So, the best thing you can do is talk to a therapist or a counselor. But if you are not in that state of mind, and if you are kind of at that point where you either do it alone or you're not comfortable doing anything else, then you might as well call this hotline. So that way you don't have to, worry about your about truly being alone if you die, because what they'll do is they'll stay on the phone with you while you quote unquote use, and if you become unresponsive, they'll notify the emergency services. So they do this without shame or judgment. I actually think it's quite noble. I think it's quite admirable for whoever is taking the time to be on that line with you. You know, it takes a really strong individual to do. I mean, it's personally really difficult for me to think about being on the phone with someone while they're abusing drugs, but I suppose if you kind of decriminalize it and demystify how that person might be feeling, then it's easier to come from a place of non judgment and feel like you're doing a good service for the world, which is to be on the other end of that hotline saving someone's life. And if you really feel like you or someone you know is getting to that point, then I highly recommend jotting down this website called neverusealone.com. They are not sponsoring this video, but obviously it's just something that I think would be a great public service to tell you about, which is why I'm telling you this now. So yeah, drugs are bad. Okay, transitioning now to a different part of this episode, which is kind of like my tips of the week. So for the health and wealth, you know, I gotta have a wealth tip and a health tip. So my wealth tip is to kind of like help you with this whole like recession thing, right? Is to save more than you spend, right? So let's pretend that you make, say, $100,000 per year, but you spend $101,000 per year. Okay, that's only $1,000, but you're still spending more than you're saving. Why is that? Why are you spending beyond your means? Where is that money going? How come you don't have enough left over to go into your investments, to pay down your debts, to support your family or your future wants and desires, right? So if you can kind of manage your behavior by saving more than you spend, you're going to be in a really great place. On top of that, because of the whole interest rate hiking, if you have any debt, you might want to consider crushing that debt. So if let's say you're saving $10,000 per year, but you have a loan for say $5,000, is there any possible shape or form that you can pay down that debt slowly over time while still saving? If the answer is yes, and you can only say contribute X amount, then something is better than nothing, because carrying that debt is increasingly becoming more expensive. And if you can't do this yet, just consider more ways to make money. Maybe you need to ask your employer for a higher salary, get a second job, do whatever it is that you have to do, as long as it's ethical and you're not, you know, killing yourself in the process. And to complement this is my health tip. My health tip is to focus on cutting down bad habits that repeatedly make you feel worse. So, some simple ideas that I know I do is staying up too late, or that one time that I just drank too much. But let's pretend that you stay up too late often, or you drink too much alcohol often, or other unnecessary things, right? If you can't cut it out completely, maybe you can just do it less. Maybe spend one day a week being really dedicated to your sleep schedule. Maybe spend one day a week being really dedicated to staying sober. But yeah, like, is it necessary to just constantly pull that lever on that slot machine with a dopamine hit of staying up late till like 2, 3 a.m. or having that 10th shot? Is it really worth it? I think the answer is no, and you will know this for yourself. But let's say you're struggling kicking those bad habits, then I know for me, what really, really worked in my darkest moments of life is to just journal about it, so that way you can just work through it. I know you can talk to a therapist or a loved one or a trusted friend or someone. So definitely do that if you feel comfortable to do so and you're talking to qualified people or people you trust. But if you can't do that, then you can at least talk to yourself and journal about it. It's not enough to think. You actually need to put things into cohesive sentences, because I noticed if I just let my mind think about and brew about all of my flaws and imperfections, then my brain gets stuck on stupid and I'll just have literally no cohesion in my thinking or no through line or action plan. Writing things down can help you organize and go about making progress. So that's why journaling is so productive, at least for me personally. So that's my wealth and health tip of the week. Wealth tip is to save more than you spend, crush your debt, and if you can't, make more money. My health tip is to curb out those bad habits that make you feel worse all the time, that are unnecessary. And if you struggle to kick those bad habits, journal about it or talk to someone, whichever is your preference. But with that being said, I think that's all I have for you. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, yeah, and these, of course, are the sources that I use to talk about these points. But yeah, I believe that might be all for now. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on social media at madifuj or hireslife. So either my personal or my, I don't know, hobby account. I don't know what you want to call it, but you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, here on YouTube, or if you're listening on like podcasts, Apple Podcasts, like wherever you listen or consume media, you can find me, and I'll make sure to put those links in the description below. But anyways, thank you so much for watching / listening. Much love for you guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and more important, continue living your best luxury lifestyle. Again, my name is Madi, and I will talk to you in a new episode.